People always think danger announces itself. A scream in the night, a shattered window, a shadow sprinting away. They're wrong. Sometimes it starts with someone watching. Not hiding, not sneaking, just standing there, staring long enough that you begin questioning your own instincts. And the worst part? By the time you realize you're being hunted, you've already been chosen. My girlfriend and I had only been in the house for 3 weeks when I first realized something was wrong. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No noise, no crash, no warning. Just a quiet, creeping sense that the feeling of home had slipped away without asking permission. We were 20, newly engaged, and hopelessly optimistic. This house was supposed to be our fresh start, a clean line drawn between the past and the future. It was small but perfect, pale walls, warm light in the evenings, a modest back garden that felt like a private slice of peace. We even joked that Bella, our rescue cat, loved it more than we did. She spent her days stretched across sunlit windowsills, tail twitching lazily, like she finally believed she was safe. Everything felt right, except for the house to our right. It sat too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. Renovation had started and then stopped abruptly. Exposed brick, unfinished walls, wooden boards leaning against broken fencing like abandoned barricades. Whoever owned it had stripped the fence separating the gardens and never replaced it, leaving our back garden open to theirs in a way that felt intimate. Uncomfortably so. Behind that abandoned house was another property separated by a tall fence. We noticed it early on, groups of young men coming and going at strange hours, cutting through the abandoned garden to reach the street. Sometimes they glanced toward our place. Sometimes they didn't. At first, we didn't think anything of it. That was our first mistake. Our first night in the new house felt ceremonial. We sat outside with mugs of tea, Bella circling our feet, the air warm and calm. We talked about furniture, future plans, silly dreams that felt suddenly possible. That's when I noticed him. I was looking up at the houses behind us, just idly scanning the windows when I saw a man standing in one of them. He wasn't backlit. The room behind him was completely dark, turning his face into a pale shape suspended in shadow. He was staring directly at us. Not glancing, not watching discreetly, staring. I nudged my girlfriend gently and whispered, "Do you see that?" She followed my gaze and stiffened. The way her body tense told me she felt it too. That sharp, instinctual warning we're taught to ignore. "He's probably just curious," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. We waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 30. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't shift his weight. His face remained slack, expressionless, like he'd been paused mid-thought. The longer we sat there, the more unnatural it felt. No phone, no drink, no visible movement at all. Eventually, without saying a word, we went inside and locked the door. That night, Bella scratched at the bedroom door until we let her in. She slept pressed against my chest, her body tense, ears twitching at every sound. The next few days were uneventful, normal, almost comforting. I went to work. My fiancé unpacked boxes, arranged shelves, made the house feel lived in. We laughed about how silly we'd been to feel unsettled. Then one evening, we went back into the garden. It was darker this time, stars scattered across the sky. We sat close together, talking softly, enjoying the quiet, until we heard wood scraping against wood. The sound came from the side, near where the broken fence stood. Before either of us could react, 3 men stepped into our garden. They didn't announce themselves, didn't apologize. They just appeared, as if they'd always been entitled to the space. They stood there staring at us, silhouettes against the dim light spilling from the kitchen window. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Are you okay?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. The youngest-looking one, maybe late 20s, stepped forward. He was holding a large bag, thick and heavy, the contents hidden. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Got some washing up tablets," he said casually. Cheap. It was such an absurd thing to offer that I almost laughed. Instead, I shook my head and made a stupid joke about already having too many. He smiled again. "Okay," he said, and then they left, just as easily as they'd come. What stayed with me wasn't the interaction itself. It was the way they'd walked into our garden like it belonged to them, like we were the intruders. After that escalated. They started entering our garden regularly, sometimes just passing through, sometimes lingering, watching, always testing boundaries. They'd lift the broken fence and use the abandoned house as a corridor, a shared artery that fed directly into our lives. I couldn't shake the thought that they knew exactly what they were doing, that they saw two young women and decided we were easy. That fear was the point. One afternoon, while cleaning the front room, I saw two police officers walk down the side of our house. They stepped into the abandoned garden, lifted the fence, looked around briefly, and left without speaking to us. I remember standing there, cloth in hand, watching them disappear, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. A few days later, they knocked on our door. The men living behind us had been evicted for antisocial behavior. Complaints from multiple neighbors. The house was vacant now. We were relieved. Genuinely. It felt like a storm cloud lifting. For a short while, things were quiet again. Too quiet. I was in the bath when I heard the bang. It was loud, sharp and sudden, like something heavy slamming against wood. I jumped, water sloshing over the edge of the tub. I didn't even finish rinsing off. I grabbed a towel and ran, heart pounding. I found my girlfriend in the spare bedroom, phone held up, recording through the window. She didn't answer me at first. Just shushed me, eyes wide. Then she whispered, "Watch." A man stood in the garden of the now empty house. I didn't recognize him. He pointed up at our bedroom window. Then he noticed us. He sprinted toward our house. I barely had time to register what was happening before he tried the front door handle, yanking it violently. Then veered off, ran back into the abandoned garden, lifted the broken fence, and began slamming into the windows of the empty house like a man possessed. We called the police immediately. They watched the footage, took statements, left. We sat on the bed afterward, shaking, asking the same questions over and over. Why our door? Why the house? What had he been trying to do? The whistling started a few nights later. It was 2:16 a.m. The sound drifted through the darkness, low, slow, deliberate. The kind of whistle meant to unsettle, to announce presence. Then came a tapping. Soft, controlled. On our window. Bella hissed from the foot of the bed, fur puffed, eyes locked on the glass. We checked the cameras. Nothing. The footage hadn't recorded. By morning, our Ring doorbell was gone, placed neatly on the ground. The SD card missing. The police told us to lock everything. One woman admitted quietly that removing the camera could mean someone was planning something. That honesty terrified me more than any reassurance could have. Weeks passed like that. Whistling, banging, shadows moving just out of view. Then one night, while scrolling through the live feed from bed, we saw him. A man in a black mask, hood pulled low, standing on our lawn. His arms were spread wide, mimicking a crucifix. He stared up at our bedroom window, head tilted as if studying us. We didn't breathe. He spoke, but we couldn't hear him. Then he crossed the street and stood there for half an hour, unmoving. The police dismissed it. Staring isn't illegal. At 2:52 a.m., the notification came. Two masked men, flashlights, one holding a crowbar. They moved slowly, methodically, scanning our windows like hunters. That was the moment I realized something that still makes my stomach drop. This wasn't random. We weren't unlucky. We were selected. And whatever they wanted from us, they weren't finished trying to get it. Let me preface this by saying I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds. I know how it reads on the page. Paranoid, dramatic, delusional. I've replayed these events 1,000 times in my head, trying to poke holes in them, trying to convince myself there's a rational explanation I somehow missed. But everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. And what scares me most isn't what I saw or heard. It's what it did to my mind. 3 months ago, I left my ex. His name was Caleb. We've been together for almost 2 years, and from the outside, it probably looked like a normal relationship. No screaming fights. No bruises. No obvious red flags that friends could point to and say, that's abuse. But Caleb was controlling in a way that was quieter and far more invasive. He tracked patterns. He remembered details. He collected information the way other people collect souvenirs. He noticed how long I took to reply to messages, then casually ask what I'd been doing during those exact minutes. He'd ask me the same question on different days just to see if my answers lined up. If they didn't, he wouldn't accuse me outright. He'd just smile and say, "Huh, that's funny." It made me doubt myself constantly. The worst part was his language. He reused phrases, nicknames, inside jokes, and emotional triggers like tools. He'd deploy them strategically, knowing exactly how they'd land. "Good morning, sunshine," he used to say whenever I was upset. Always sarcastic. Always just sharp enough to sting. When I finally left him, I didn't just break up. I disappeared. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media, moved apartments. I didn't tell mutual friends where I was going. I wanted a clean slate, anonymity, peace. For a while it worked. Then came the barista. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and uneventful. I stopped by a small coffee shop near my new place, the kind of place that smells like burnt espresso and old wood. I'd only been there once before. As I stepped up to the counter, the barista smiled at me. She was around my age, brown hair pulled back. Nothing remarkable about her appearance. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She tilted her head slightly and said, "Good morning, sunshine." My stomach dropped. I froze, halfway through pulling out my wallet. The word echoed in my head, loud and wrong. It wasn't a common nickname. No one else had ever called me that. I hadn't told anyone in this city about Caleb. About us. I forced a laugh and told myself I was being ridiculous. Just a latte, please," I said. She watched me the entire time she made my drink. Not in a flirty way, not even a curious way. It felt like recognition. I left without finishing the coffee. A few days later, ordered a rideshare to work. The driver was an older man, maybe in his 50s. He didn't say much at first, just nodded when I got in. But I noticed him glancing at me in the rearview mirror more than necessary. Then, casually, like he was commenting on the weather, he said, "Ever figure out what you were running from?" I felt cold all over. "What?" I asked. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Nothing. Just something you said once." Caleb had said those exact words to me during a fight. Leaned in close, eyes locked on mine, and asked, "Ever figure out what you're running from?" I stared out the window for the rest of the ride, hands clenched in my lap, heart pounding. 2 coincidences, I told myself. They happened. They kept happening. A woman at the grocery store bumped into me and whispered, "You don't get to just disappear." A man passing me on the sidewalk muttered, "Still wearing your hair like that." Someone who worked in my building hummed a song as I walked by, the exact song Caleb used to play during our arguments, and said, "You always like this one." Different faces. Same tone. Same familiarity. Same eyes. That was the part one couldn't shake. They all looked at me the same way. Like they knew me. Like they were waiting for me to react, to confirm something for them. I started checking reflections, store windows, mirrors, dark screens, half expecting to see Caleb standing behind me. He never was, which somehow made it worse. I started questioning my sanity. I replayed conversations in my head, wondering if I'd said these things out loud without realizing it. If I was projecting, if grief and stress were warping my perception. Eventually, desperation won. I contacted Caleb's sister. I didn't accuse him directly. I just asked her to tell him to stop whatever he was doing, to leave me alone. Her response came the next day. "I don't know what you're talking about. Caleb's been in rehab for 6 weeks. No phone access." I didn't believe her. Not until she posted a photo a week later. Caleb, pale and gaunt, holding a sobriety chip, eyes hollow. If he was behind this, wasn't hands-on, but it was still him. One night, I stayed late at work. My apartment didn't feel safe anymore. Nothing had happened there, not really, but the silence felt wrong. Like something was waiting for me. At around 10 p.m., I finally headed home. I walked with my headphones in, no music playing, a habit I'd picked up so I could hear footsteps. When I turned onto my block, I saw a man sitting on the stoop of the building across from mine. Hood up, head down. I almost ignored him. Then he said, "Cold out tonight, huh, sunshine?" I didn't look at him. I didn't answer. I walked faster, inside my apartment. I locked every bolt and sat on the couch, listening to the building breathe, pipes clicking, distant footsteps, doors opening and closing somewhere far away. I barely slept. The next morning, my doormat was flipped over. I live alone on the top floor. No one passes my door casually. On the underside of the mat, someone had written in pen, You can change your face too if you want, but I'll still recognize you. I threw up in the sink. I didn't pack a bag. I booked a hotel and left. The hotel was quiet, crowded enough to feel safe, anonymous enough to disappear into. At around 2 a.m., there was a knock. 3 slow taps. I sat up in bed, heart racing. Another knock. I looked through the peephole. A woman stood there, maybe in her 40s. Her face was blank, not angry, not tired, not confused. Just empty. She didn't knock again. She didn't speak. She stood there, staring straight ahead. Eventually, she left. The next morning, the front desk told me no one should have been on that floor. All the rooms around mine were vacant. That's when it clicked. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordination. I remembered something Caleb once mentioned. A forum, a group, a place where people shared tactics. He framed it as self-improvement productivity hacks. At the time, I hadn't questioned it. Now I wondered if it was something else. A service. A game. A way to outsource fear. He didn't need to follow me. He just needed to make sure I was never sure who I was looking at. I moved again. Dyed my hair. Changed routines. It worked for a while. Until last week. I was walking home from the bookstore when a woman passed me and said, without slowing down, still hiding behind books, "Sunshine." She didn't even look at me. I don't trust faces anymore. I don't know if this will ever stop. But I know one thing for certain. Even if he never shows his face again, Caleb made sure I'd never stop seeing him. My family doesn't travel. We're homebodies, birthdays in living rooms, holidays around the same dining table, vacations postponed indefinitely because next year will be better. So when my aunt suggested a family trip to one of Michigan's Great Lakes, everyone was stunned. 18 of us. 3 generations. Cousins who barely spoke anymore. Parents who never took time off. Somehow, my cousin found an Airbnb big enough to hold us all, sitting right on the lake with a private beach stretching out like an ocean. It felt too good to be true. And it was. We arrived in the afternoon. The main house was beautiful. Tall windows, weathered wood, the constant sound of water rolling against the shore. Sunlight poured in everywhere, and for the first time in years, my family felt light. Laughing, relaxed, together. Behind the main house was a separate structure, a 2-story garage converted into bedrooms. Because of our large group, 4 of us, my cousins and I, were assigned to sleep there. At first, we didn't mind. It felt like our own space, away from the chaos of the main house. That changed the moment we walked inside. The garage smelled damp, like mold and old carpet. The bathroom rugs were stained. The beds were unmade, sheets wrinkled and yellowed like they hadn't been washed in months. The latch on the door barely caught. One hard push and it would have opened. It was clear where the cleaners had spent their time. My cousins were grossed out immediately. "I'm not sleeping on that," Maria said, pointing at the bed like it had personally offended her. So we decided to wash the sheets. The washer and dryer were downstairs, small and old. Only one set of sheets at a time. It was obvious we'd be up late. We passed the time upstairs, joking half-heartedly. But beneath it all, something gnawed at me. That familiar sense of wrongness, like a pressure building behind my eyes. I've felt it before. Rarely. And every time, it's been followed by something I wish I'd never experienced. I told my cousins to stay alert. They listened. We'd all lived through a break-in years ago. You don't forget that kind of fear. Around midnight, the washer buzzed. I volunteered to go downstairs. The garage creaked as I descended, every step echoing louder than it should have. I swapped the laundry, folded the warm sheets, and carried them back upstairs. The relief on my cousins' faces was immediate. Clean meant safe, or at least safer. They asked if I could do theirs too. So I kept going. Up and down. Up and down. Each time, the space felt colder. Heavier. By 2:37 a.m., we were finally done. We made the beds quickly, exhaustion settling in. Nikki insisted we leave the lamp on. Everyone fell asleep. Except me. I stayed up scrolling on my phone, doing schoolwork, pretending not to listen, even though I was listening to everything. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., something slammed into the garage door. The sound was explosive, like a body being thrown full force against metal. I shot upright. My cousins didn't stir. I waited, heart hammering, telling myself it was wind. Then it happened again. Same sound, same force. The entire structure shook. No wind does that. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the door, waiting for the latch to fail. 20 minutes passed. Then a third impact hit. The garage trembled violently, rattling the walls. This time, two of my cousins bolted awake. "What was that?" Nikki whispered. "I heard it twice already," I said. "This is the third." No one argued. We all knew. This wasn't an accident. We texted my aunt. It was 4:11 a.m. when she replied. She woke my uncle immediately. We stayed frozen upstairs until there was a knock, gentle, controlled. When we opened the door, my uncle stood there. Behind him were my dad and several of my older male cousins. That's when I knew it was serious. "Grab your stuff," my uncle said quietly. "You're staying in the main house." "What's going on?" Maria asked. "There's someone on the property." My chest collapsed inward. We rushed out, bags half zipped, shoes mismatched. Inside the main house, lights were coming on, voices rising in confusion. Everyone gathered in the living room, the lake stretching black and endless beyond the windows. We told them everything. The crashes, the timing, the fear. My aunt explained what happened next. When my uncle went outside, she followed him. He'd spotted someone standing behind the garage. Not hiding, not moving, just standing there. My uncle shouted, "Hey!" The man didn't react. At that exact moment, the back door of the main house slammed shut, hard enough to shake the walls. There was no wind. My aunt panicked, thinking someone had slipped inside. She ran to wake my dad and cousins while my uncle kept his eyes on the figure. And then the man walked away, not into the darkness, not toward the trees. He simply vanished. No footsteps, no sound, no disturbance. My uncle checked the ground. There were no footprints. Later, my brothers found something worse. 2 jester cards, one in the main house, one in the garage. The one in the garage was twisted, exaggerated grin, warped eyes, something deeply wrong about it. Someone mentioned that jesters symbolize mockery. That loud noises at 3 a.m. line up with what people call the devil's hour. None of us laughed. No one returned to the garage that night. We slept on floors, couches, anywhere we could. My mom gave up her bed. At around 4 a.m., she woke to footsteps on the porch. She didn't open her eyes. Then she heard the basement door rattle. Someone trying to get in. She ran downstairs, but no one was there. The boys were still asleep. That was our last night. We left early. On the drive home, theories filled the car. A neighbor, a watcher, someone who thought I was alone during laundry, someone who didn't expect 18 people. But no theory explained everything. The man not running, the disappearance, the cards, the silence. We contacted the Airbnb host. She said she checked the cameras above the garage. She never got back to us. I still think about that night, about the way the garage shook, about the man who wanted to be seen, and the most terrifying thought of all. Whatever he was, he didn't need to chase us. He just needed us to know he could reach us anytime he wanted. And then he let us go.